Than 1 minute in heaven.
I'm waiting for something to make sense. I feel like it's going to be a while.
Good luck.
Have you been on our show before, George? We're kind of creating the James Craig song around business time. It's Roxanne / business time.
All right, here we go.
James Craig.
Ready?
Recording live from the Haley Sisters Memorial Studios, straight out of lovely Elmont, Ontario, it's time for This Death Clock Has 60 Minutes, your unofficial Warmahordes news broadcast. It's 8 p.m. Wednesday night, the beers are cold, the news is fresh, and the death clock starts now.
Good evening, everybody. As you can see, it's not actually the death clock. It's Hobby Night. It's the Moosemachines. What's it called? Moosemachines Magical Painting Hour?
Magical Miniature Painting Hour.
Ah, yes.
We need a theme song for that.
Starring the one and only James Craig. That's our theme song. You like that?
I like it. I like it.
Pretty sweet.
It's pretty sweet. You don't have to sell your miniatures to the night.
You don't have to.
Craig. You could if you wanted to, but you don't have to. So yeah, once every 3 weeks, we all sit down with some minis to paint. We hang out with our buddy James, who gives us some tips and tricks. We work out the problems that we're having with whatever thing we're painting. We get ahead on a couple of projects. Let's go through what everybody's working on tonight. We'll start with the one and only guy to my left. Your right, Maelstrom. What are you working on tonight, Maelstrom?
Maelstrom is working on Azrael tonight because for now I'm back.
He's
on the
not
Legion
a troll.
Train. Well, I'm back on the Legion train right now, and so Azrael got me Assassinations my first 3 games with Legion, so I was like, all right, I'll paint you up. Figure I owe you that.
It's good policy.
So that's what I'm.
As long as he earned it.
The wings are looking fantastic, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you're
We're
doing
getting there.
George, Jorge, the one and only. What are you working on?
I'm painting some Kodiaks this evening for my Hamkovich list.
Moving right along.
Yeah.
So much ham.
So much ham.
So here's a funny story. I was looking up pictures of Harkovich to use for our Fight Night poster last week, and the 4th image on a Google search when you search for Harkovich is just a giant leg of ham.
Nice. That's solid.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
James.
I did a Harkovich once.
James, you may as well introduce what both of us are working on this evening, because it requires some explanation.
All right. So once a year, the Nova Open charitable organization connected to the Nova Open miniatures gaming event weekend, they gather together a bunch of people and say, hey, you should get more people together and you should paint things for us that we can raffle off and auction off and raise money for a lot of really good causes.
Sounds like a pyramid scheme. Yeah,
pretty much. And that's why I download stuff on Uscripts. So Dave Taylor, a very old friend, said, James, we need a War Machine thing. War Machine's a thing. We need a War Machine thing. So last year we painted a Signar army that we raffled off and made a good little boatload of money on.
$1 bazillion.
Yeah.
True story.
And then it's funny because I don't remember the actual numbers, but I should look them up because it makes for a better sale, because Nova Open charitable arm has raised like a lot of money, like tens of thousands of dollars for charities. And I think last year the grand total was somewhere around like $43,000 or something like that, US. So it was a good year, and we're hoping for an even bigger year this year. So it went well enough last year that Dave came to me and said, James, you got to get together another team and do another War Machine thing. So
he got the same one.
Yes. And so we're painting a troll army. I gathered together some of the finest painters I know.
And Will.
Beat you to it. And the idea was that everybody takes a part of the army. We show it all off as we make things, and then people all over the world, you don't have to be at the event, can buy raffle tickets, and hopefully the hype we generate along the way lends itself to that. I think so far it's looking pretty good. The feedback, as we've shown off pieces by Aaron Lovejoy and Dallas Kemp, so far have gone over really, really well. I just saw Ben's Bears work in progress, because everybody loves attack bears.
Murder bears
And
are beautiful.
they look fantastic. And Will and Aggie are working on Raiders right now. Sam Lenz, one of my favorite painters, is working on Rock, and that's going to be ridiculous. Matt DiPietro is doing a piece. Chris Surrey is doing Colgrima for us. That's going to be amazing. There's like a gaggle of people. Devin's doing some. I'm sure I'm just missing like a million people off the top of my head.
We didn't even get to see Matt's. We didn't even get to see Matt's piece until like the last second last year, and it was like,
That's right.
God damn! It was brilliant. It was beautiful.
That's the way it's going to be this year too. I guarantee it.
Sweet.
And Justin from Mr. Justin from Secret Weapon Miniatures is doing the Hooch Holler.
Oh, that's gonna be so cool. And
I already know what he's doing,
Yom,
and it's ridiculous.
Yamla Machine showed off his
Oh, yeah.
stone dudes the other day.
The stone unit with all the glow effects. It's totally Yom, and it's totally awesome. It's exactly what I had hoped that he would do, and it's bonkers. It's so good.
Yeah, if anybody knows Yam's work, he is like the master of the glow effect. So yeah, it's pretty sweet. So Aggie and I have been working on getting our 2 units. We're doing 2 min units of Raiders. Is that right? It's Raiders, right?
Correct.
Yep. And it's going to be cool because Aggie and I both paint very differently, but we were both trained by the same. Our first trainer was the same trainer, and of course, we both are good friends with Ben. So it'll be really cool to see how different those 2 units will be, even though we're painting them with the same color palette and the same style. I think that to me is one of the most exciting parts, is seeing what a bunch of painters do with the same color palette, but all with very different styles. I think that's a pretty neat thing. Like James is, because he's not going to talk about this too much, I'm sure. James is sort of the master of bodging and taking one model and adding a bunch of cool things. So James, you did a bunch of mods on that brawler, didn't you?
Yeah, I love to personalize models. Conversions are all over the place in my stuff, and so it's a Northkin list. The list itself was written by John Jr. Henry, one of the finest Trollblood players anywhere, and so it's a Northkin list. So I wanted my brawler to be a little more specialized, something that's going to be different from your average one, show off a little bit. And so I replaced one of the brawler's chain weapons with a hang on just 1 second, guys. There we go. With a barrel. I put a big keg on the end of the swinging chain, and then I gave him a beard, a 2-pronged Viking beard. Because Rock has a beard, so that means Dire Trolls can have beards. Mm-hmm. And Valka's got a cool beard, so I figured our brawler should have a cool beard. And then I gave him a fur. Oops, wrong way. Ooh, there we go. Still can't see a damn thing because my lighting sucks. I gave him a fur, coat, cloak, shoulder wrap thing. I furred him up for the winter, for being in the Northkin. So he's a bit of fun. I gave him a couple extra armor plates too, and he will be ready to roll soon.
I'd like to apologize to all the people that get my Raider unit. I did not do any modifications. In my defense, I also had to paint 6 of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, most of the pieces aren't modified in any way.
Yeah, exactly.
With the exception of the nice bases provided to us by Justin at Secret Weapon as well.
That's right. Yeah, they're
as
pretty
well.
sweet.
Plug them while I'm at it. So we've got all matching bases. I set the paint scheme for the bases, and we used the Privateer Press Troll Blood paint scheme for skin. I figured if Dallas is one of our painters, we might as well use his system. And that made it pretty straightforward for everyone. And yeah, so far so good.
Yeah, and it's actually, so looking at it, the list last year, we went through a CI, or it was like a CID or an errata change right in the middle of our Nova Open list, and we were rocked with having the Black 13th in the list, which at that point, I believe the Black 13th are a bit more playable now. George, they went through a modification, right?
A little bit.
So the sort of, it wasn't an issue with our Nova Open list, but it wasn't because at the end when Nova Open finally happened, it wasn't super competitive, even though Marc-Andre had built it as a pretty competitive list. This year, totally the opposite. This list, I think, got more competitive while we painted it. Yeah. It's a pretty good list. And of course, John is, just to throw that out there, whoever wins this list, John's fully open to sitting there and talking you through the tactics for this list.
He's actually completed a short write-up to go along with the army as well. It'll be delivered with the army.
Oh, dang. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go into you guys. I have been away. I've been doing work for 3 weeks solid and have not got a single frigging game in. So let's go over to the two guys that have gotten some games in. Jorge.
I got a couple of games in recently. I played David last night. We had a pretty good time. Our dice were horrific, I think is a good way of saying it. Neither of us could roll well basically at any time during the entire match, which was nice because it was neither of us. Yeah, exactly. I did manage to clock him out, but then we played it through, and he managed to get a couple of the flying ret lights. I can't remember what they're called now.
Oh, the harpies?
Harpies, yeah. He managed to get a couple harpies on me, and
harpies are good.
Yeah, they are.
Again, like 8 points.
Yeah, and if they hadn't, if Hark hadn't gotten softened up ahead of time, or he was positioned better, obviously, it wouldn't have been such a big deal. I did have a Kodiak literally standing behind Ron on his turn, and he figured it was an all or nothing. It's the standard don't win too hard, because your opponent will take whatever chance you give them.
Yeah.
And then I died. So yeah, it was a good game. That Harkovich, it's a Harkovich Jack scenario list. So basically, I've designed it with a bunch of things that can slam, throw. I've got the Khador Jacks that have a beatback gun as well. So the idea is that it can push you out of zones no matter how you get in it. And it has enough clouds to cover itself going up the table. So, I've only played 2 games with it, but so far it seems pretty good.
Jason,
What's up?
You got some games in, huh?
I've gotten a few games in, actually. Mostly against Khador, unfortunately, but they've been games nonetheless.
Are you finding with Legion you're starting to crack Khador, or are you having problems with Legion and Khador?
Legion and Khador. So the problem with Legion and Khador is that right now I can't take the Hellmouth and any other theme but Ravens, which is just no good into Khador at all because it's just a bunch of POW 12 infantry that just die. Or Primal Terrors, which isn't fully fleshed out yet. They're still missing quite a few models, which actually 3 of them will be releasing on Friday. So not having Hellmouths into Khador is a problem because Legion doesn't really crack armor that well. They can, for sure, but delivery is a problem. So a lot of the times against Khador, you're not going to out-attrition. It's you need to force scenario or go for the assassination, which has been the assassination's been the ways I've won against Khador pretty much every game. Yeah, so there's a lot of bait and switch, which I think kind of makes me a bit better of a player in a way because I'm not just running things in. I have to really think about piece trading and where to set up and when to give up pieces, and it's forcing me to play in a different way, which is kind of fun.
Well, and I think that's pretty important. As we saw when we talked to Chris Orr, that peace trading is an important way to play Legion because
Yep.
you can give up that one big heavy type of thing,
Yes.
and if they don't deal with it, now they've got that ridiculous high damage heavy in their face hole.
Correct. Yeah.
I do that all the time with my Rulik list.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been playing a slight variation on Chris Orr's Thags 1 list,
Oh, awesome!
which is really good.
Glad to see you playing Thags too. That was like your original caster. Like
No, Thags 1.
Yeah, Thags
Thags 1. I've actually never played Thags 2.
Oh, okay.
I've never had a single game with Thags 2. I'll probably get shot by the Legion players for that, but but I've been playing Thags 2, and then I played George. I played Abby 2 against George, and that game only lasted a few minutes, so it doesn't really count.
Yeah, I went to get a snack and I came back and it was done.
Yeah. George made a bit of a mistake right off the bat, and
Yeah, I made a positioning error.
that Legion loves to capitalize on positioning errors, especially with Proteus, who threatens like 16 inches across the board.
Worst thing was he totally would have believed me if I'd put it in the place that I was going to put it.
Oh, 100%.
But I caught my own error and fixed it, which meant I died.
Yeah. That'll teach you to catch your errors.
Yeah, that'll teach me to play correctly. God damn it.
God damn it, Jason!
We also have I managed to wrangle in a new player.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So I've had a new guy come over to my house for a couple BattleBox games.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah, all the time. And he came to the pub with us on Monday. We
Say his
played a
name
couple
for me.
more. His name is Mihal. He's Irish. So it's like U-Haul, but Mihal. But it's spelt Miceal.
I would never say that correctly
Nope.
after reading his name.
Nope, I know.
Gaelic.
Yeah, exactly. He's been living here for 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Completely managed to destroy his Irish accent,
Wow.
because he said that when he does speak with his Irish accent, nobody can understand a goddamn word he says.
And women swoon.
And women would just be swooning. And he's married, so he's got to be careful.
Yeah, you got to watch that shit. You don't get invited
but
back
you
to
would never
parties.
guess. You'd never guess by talking to him that he's Irish.
That's cool.
Never know. But he's a really great guy. He seems to be really enjoying it so far. He's been playing the Troll Blood Battle Box, but he's shown
So he's
a bit
been
of
losing a
interest in
lot?
Cricks. So I think next time we're going to give the Cricks Battle Box a try and see how he likes that. I was like,
sweet.
if you want to play Cricks, then you might as well,
Yeah, and
because
the
there
good
ain't
news
nothing
is-
wrong with Cricks right
And the
now.
good news is there's a whole lot of cricks around.
Yeah,
so-
and I have a full Cricks army that I'd be more than willing to lend out. So, yeah, so things have been good.
So, James, I want to go over to you because you had what, for all intents and purposes, sounds like an amazing weekend with Sergio Calvo.
Yeah, that was fantastic. Cappy bases all around. For the last number of years, there's been two things happening around. One, there's been an upswing in the number of artists from Europe who are willing to come to North America to do a set of dates at different places. Somebody puts them up. We pay them for their time, or take them out and give them a vacation while they're at it. So then we work them like dogs for 2 straight days in a basement somewhere. Sounds about right.
Yeah, you do.
So this year, Sergio was one of the artists who we convinced to do a tour. So he's been to Toronto, and now this past weekend he was in Quebec City, and now he's off to Winnipeg, Calgary, and Vancouver. Not necessarily in that order. So he gets to see his way across the country, hang out with a bunch of friendly nerds, and have a good old time teaching us to paint. The system that he uses is really interesting. It's funny because part of it really overlaps with what I've been doing for the last couple of years, and part of it was so alien I had no idea what was going on. So it was really, really quite a clever way to approach things in the end. And although my piece that weekend turned out pretty janky, overall it was a good experience, and one that I think will help me keep pushing.
So
stuff.
what was the technique? Because Ben kind of alluded to some things, but it's an airbrush combined with kind of a highlighting technique. Is that the deal?
Yeah, I guess so. It's he starts out. He doesn't start with the airbrush. He finishes with the airbrush, which is similar to what I would do, except I would start with the airbrush, work with my brush, and then go back to my airbrush. He skips the first step and just breaks into some fairly bold, heavy-duty base coats. Nothing, no glazing, no little thin stuff. Just build it up and build it up bold. But thinking about how you build it up as you go, not thinking in terms of directional lighting, but more thinking in terms of creating volumes, thinking about each part of the model as a geometric solid. So if the shoulder, you light it as if it were a sphere. The arm you light as if it were cylinders, or the torso as a cylinder. If you think about it in those kind of terms, it's very, very kind of art school. But it really works. It's a really interesting way to approach the foundational layers, and then all the blending, instead of working through small glazes, is done with the airbrush and a couple of interesting approaches with that. So it was neat.
That sounds neat.
And from what I saw, it was really cool seeing Ben's piece. I haven't seen yours yet, but it was cool seeing Ben's piece because it was just such a different style for him, and I think it really pushed some accents and highlights. That was something it's always really cool to see an artist start.
I'm never going to show you a good image of this on this thing.
No,
Here it is.
Here it is. It's a blob.
It's a barbarian.
And it was a Conan mini.
Blobbarian.
Conan's pretty sweet too. Yeah.
Yeah, totally doesn't look like anything there. But hey, there he is.
So let's. I don't know if we've got anybody in the audience who has any questions, but
Aren't you gonna ask me about my games?
Oh, I didn't.
You got games in, James?
Every time I ask you about games, James is like, "Yeah, I didn't get any in this week." But
No, I didn't get any in this time either. I just like to be asked.
You got me.
Very
You
sneaky.
got me. You snuck that right in there.
I've been painting like a madman. Those busts that I was doing from the character from Blood Drive.
Mhm.
The guy who set me up with them asked if he could have one on a tighter deadline than originally anticipated. So I set aside, instead of working simultaneously on multiples, I set it aside and just focused on the one. So I declared one of them finished last night, and I just dropped it over to my friend Trevor Photography,
Nice.
and it's going to get shipped out to New York tomorrow or the next day.
So is that going to be like the cover art for that?
No,
piece?
that's a different one. This one's for the actor that the sculpture is actually of. I've got one for him. Two of them are going to him, but one's a special, slightly different thing. I'll tell you more about it next time.
Cool.
Ooh.
Building anticipation. That is like the rule of podcasting, right?
Yeah.
That's why we bring James Craig back every week. Anticipation. So yeah, for those who don't know, one of the reasons why we started doing this was it's kind of, well, Menoth John came back, but when he first left the interwebs, one of the things that I really liked about what Menoth John did was this: he set up his podcast as a way to get some painting done. And James is a bit of an anomaly because he's painting all the time and he's got projects going all the time. But most of us do these rushes of painting. Like, you sit down, you've got a tournament coming up, you want to have one fully painted list, so you burn the midnight oil for a week.
Yeah.
You get a bunch of crappy paints done because you didn't really spend enough time on them to make them good paints. But they're done now. You've got a fully painted list, and then you move on. What I thought we could discuss a bit to kind of keep the juices flowing this evening is keeping the juices flowing. Tips and tricks to keep yourself painting and moving forward. Now, Jason, I wanted to go to you first because you actually have been, out of the three of us, probably the most consistent in sort of just chugging along, getting a mini painted every couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm really slow. Like, it takes me a long time. Especially with certain models, like Cole Grimma took me like a month. Like I have a baby, so I mean, I get like an hour a night here and there, but I try to make a point to get some done as much as possible.
So what is it that keeps you motivated? What do you do to kind of keep chugging along?
I really like painting. I find it super relaxing, and after a day, it's nice just to kind of sit back and usually I have some music going or it's just something brainless on the television and sit under a light and let my brain go for a while.
So the Bachelor in Painting, that's what Jason does. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, let's go over to James. James, you're probably the most experienced out of all of us. What is it that you do to keep yourself painting?
I hate painting.
What do you do to keep yourself modding miniatures and getting them done?
No. For me, it's that weird pathological artist thing. I have to make stuff, and it has to be done. Mm-hmm. So every once in a while, I just have to keep making stuff, and if I don't, I feel really stupid. So I make something else. Sometimes I paint them. Sometimes I just make stuff. But the thing that drives me to finish things the most is actually kind of what you were saying before: competitions, tournaments, events, having a deadline where I have to have something. Yep. Charity work. That's what makes me actually finish things, to be perfectly honest.
So maybe part of that could be is get involved in those kind of things, and that will keep you moving, keep you going.
Absolutely. I don't like showing up to events unpainted. I'm contemplating doing it anyway for once, which is kind of dumb, but
you want to play some Trolls?
I really want to play my Trolls. But I don't think I will. I think I'll probably still bring my dwarves. But with things like the charity, things like painting competitions, various events, the community, being part of it is what motivates me. And also, I spent a big chunk of my life, going to art school and wanting to learn art and decide what I want to make. And I always knew I needed to create things and make things. And the weird thing was that after all of that, my hobby ended up being my primary art form. So this is what I do. And so I get cool ideas, and then I need to kind of see them happen. So I've got dioramas where I've got like mountains of stuff behind me ready to make, and they're just waiting to happen. I've got busts and pieces. I know everybody's got like lineups of pieces to do, but I've got pieces I've been thinking about and planning like almost daily in my head for like a year and a half now, 2 years now. And seeing those through is really important. The problem is when I get to about the 80% mark and I can see, yes, I will accomplish this, and I can see the end is in sight, it's that last 20% that takes me like 50% of the time. Because I've already figured it all out at that point. I know I can make it happen. The things that I was striving to do that I didn't know if I could do, at that point I've done them. And it's just finishing the piece is always hard. So that's why I definitely need deadlines and competitions to make them happen.
I'm kind of the opposite. Like I if I'm close to finishing a piece, that's when I put that extra like 6 hours into it. And I think it's that I hate incompletion. Does that make sense? Like that.
Totally.
For me, it's like I want to get it done. And that I think the problem with doing things like units has always been for me that you get 1 or 2 done and you're done. You're like, I'm done these. I've got 5 more to do and I don't want to do them because I'm already done. I think that's
why I always paint units in assembly.
Yeah, it's probably better advice than the way I do things, but
paint them a figure at a time. You're looking at madness.
George, as the master of putting off painting for a really long time and then suddenly blitzing it.
Yeah, I do have a tendency to do that, don't I?
You are the only person I know that can paint an entire army overnight.
It's not literally overnight, but it feels like
it. It feels like it. It's like I have nothing painted, and then 3 days later he shows up with a fully painted army. What is your sort of tips for keeping motivated during that grind period? Because I mean, really, that's the thing is the way that you do it. It's all or nothing. It's like I'm going to get them all done now.
Yeah. Well, what I tend to do is really, really, really waffle on my paint scheme. Mm-hmm. So what you normally don't see because I re-spray them is the 5 or 6 or 7 models that I've done that I absolutely hate. And then I will stumble upon the one that I like. And then once I know how to do it, I can just go ahead and do it. Now, one of the secrets is I really hate painting, but I really like having painted models. So I'm perfectly happy to play unpainted, but I would really rather have painted models. And since the way to get painted models is to paint, it's just a matter of buckle down and do it. I find, I would say the primary way to get through it is to find a television show that you don't need to look at, has about 1 million episodes, and is still distracting occasionally.
Coronation Street.
I use Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Mystery Science Theater 3000 is perfect for that.
Because it is basically brain dead.
Yeah.
Because the movies that they're that they're talking about are just so horrible that you really don't want to watch them, let alone need to.
The audio is pretty much better than
than the video.
Yeah.
And it is mostly just a distraction. And then what I do is I just get down to the grind. I will pick the color, and today's color gets painted on every single model. And then I pick up the next color and paint it on every single model.
So you kind of do assembly line regardless of whether it's a unit or not.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I will assembly line like jacks. Like I can do probably 10 jacks at once. And I have a really big benefit over both of you guys in that I suck at painting. So what that means is that I can be very happy with a much worse paint job because I know that I can't do particularly better. So I don't have to spend 14 hours on a model to make myself happy. I can spend 30 minutes to an hour on a jack and go, wow, that looks like a jack and it looks kind of like the paint scheme I wanted. Let's do it.
And I would rather see that across the table from me every single time.
Yeah.
Hey,
My plastic and metal.
My models look fucking amazing at about 4 feet away.
Yeah.
Don't you dare get any closer. But at 4 feet away, they're fine. And since I look at my models as game pieces outside of a very few models that actually mean something to me, I am perfectly happy with that. If PP,
and with the ones that mean something to him, he hands them to somebody else to paint anyway.
Absolutely. If I have a model that actually means something to me, I'll hand it to Will, I'll hand it to Ben, somebody who I know will do it justice. For example, when the PG program shut down, they gave all the PGs who were current this really cool Bokur. And I looked at that model and I'm like, there is no way I want to paint this model, but I really want to have it painted. So the first thing I did was hand it to Will and say, this needs really good paint job. You can enter it in whatever the hell you like.
Well, and the nice thing is with limited edition models, usually your local friendly painter guys will get excited about getting it painted because they're not going to get access to it any other way.
Yeah, exactly. And
Will did a great job on that one too, I might add.
Oh my God,
buddy. I
it
appreciate
looks
that.
great. And within the next week, it's actually going into a display case that will also contain the original artwork. It was based on my PG certificate and a PG coin and a 5-year-old salt coin. So it'll have pride of place in the display case. So it should be really cool.
So next topic. We got to see Ben, and this will go out probably to the greater world in the next couple of days. Ben's working on painting those bears.
Bears.
One of the things that we're working on with this troll army is a lot of furry cloaks. James, do you have any advice for painting fur?
Nope.
James Craig!
Okay.
You're fucking awesome. This is why we always have him on as a guest.
Nope.
There's a couple of different things that you can consider when you're doing a lot of fur, but the thing that matters the most if you want it to look good, particularly with more like current or contemporary sculpts of fur, you'll see that the style tends to be bunches or groupings of fur together, sections, if you will, and highlight and shadow each of those sections as its own piece instead of just dry brushing across the entire surface. There's nothing wrong with dry brushing. If you're going to dry brush fur, it's tempting to just go across, like side to side across the grain because it picks up more easily. My suggestion is to go along the length of the fur strands instead. It's a little more time consuming, but your brain picks up on small patterns and things very easily. I talk to my students about this with their pencil crayon work all the time. If you follow the contour that's supposed to be there, it will accentuate it rather than distract from it. Your brain will read it more as a fur texture and less as a dry brush across a fur texture. So yeah, two things: dry brush with the shape instead of across it, and treat each section of sculpted hair as its own piece for highlight and shadow instead of just the overall bulk of the entire piece top to bottom.
The nice thing with the current way that they're sculpting fur, which is a lot easier than it used to be, ladies and gentlemen, you got it easy because they're sculpting fur with such depth now. One of the cool things is it really takes to washes well, so don't be afraid to use for your shadows. Don't be afraid to use dark washes to really pick those darker parts out. And I mean, I really like that, James. That's a sort of something that I don't think most people do, is also running with the grain of the fur. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so you can kind of side brush is a good way to put it instead of dry brushing. Dry brushing sort of blanketly highlights everything equally, whereas if you really pick out those highlights, it can make a huge difference. And don't be afraid to use washes, even if some super high-end painters like, washes are dumb, you should never use them. No,
washes are just a
painter
tool.
says, I like washes.
Yeah, washes are just a tool. They're like any other tool.
And with something like fur, especially when you've got deep recesses in the fur, man, washes can just make that game so much easier. So you're working on wings, Jason.
Yeah.
What's the you're working on getting some purples into those depths. What is your what's the technique you're working on over there?
What I did for this was I kind of just based everything the same color blue, which is pretty much my Legion color is Frostbite with just a dab of Exile blue to kind of darken it up.
Mm-hmm.
So I base coated the whole wing in that. Then I took a bit more Exile blue and added it to the Frostbite just to get a darker shade, and kind of went into all the recesses and just kind of painted out the stress lines, I guess they're called.
Mm-hmm.
After that was done, I took a purple wash, the Druki Violet, and just kind of deepened those recesses a little further.
Damn you, GW, for still making the best washes.
They're so good.
They're made out of like magic and unicorn blood or something.
Yeah, they're so good. Then I kind of
That's how they stay so young.
dry brushed the tops of the wings with pure Frostbite just to bring up the highlights a little more.
The most evil thing that GW has done in the last couple of years is making these double-sized pots of Nuln oil and Agrax Earthshade, because
And
inevitably, because
everything's
it was already they started doing the other ones because we all know that once a year at least you tip over your bottle of Agrax Earthshade, so they started selling us double-sized pots.
Yeah.
Just to really fuck with us.
Yeah. James got the double size too.
Yeah. Because I haven't spilled a double-sized pot of Agrax Earthshade this
man.
week.
Oh man. So we had our living room carpet like steam cleaned and everything like a month ago.
And the water was all Agrax Earthshade?
And the next day,
Oh, no.
I was sitting at the couch painting, and I went to get up, and didn't I tip the bottle of fucking Nuln oil onto the carpet?
Oh, perfect.
Oh man, it was bad.
Classic.
What did you do? Nothing, wife. It's all right.
It's fine. The carpet has this one stain
fine.
of black in it.
Yeah.
OxyClean for the win.
Yeah, it actually came out pretty easy with some OxyClean.
OxyClean gets...
Oh yeah.
Learned a new thing today.
Yeah, it came out. Looks fine now. But at the
It's
time,
fine.
I was
Everything
like,
is fine.
Everything is awesome. There's one. I'm shaking up this thing of Roulette Gold, and it's still chunky. Anybody got any tips for getting the chunks out of your metallics?
Metal sprue.
agitators.
Metal sprue?
So every time that you're cutting the little metal sprue chunks off of a decent sized model or like the feed of something,
Okay.
take the chunk that you have left and throw it in one of your bottles that does not yet have
That's
an
really smart.
agitator of some type in it, and it works great.
Huh.
Like you can buy like
Like little
what do they call them?
ball bearings.
Ball bearings are stupid expensive because they have to be really
Yeah.
well formed.
Yeah.
I use hematite beads.
Yeah.
Yeah, hematite beads. What I get is pie weights. They're little chunks of like ceramic, and they're randomly sized small beads.
They're not made of pie.
They're not made of pie, unfortunately.
I'm disappointed now.
But
Sounds we should make pie beads. Ooh.
but they are cheap because they're used for holding down pie crusts when you're blind baking, and they you get like for like $5 or $10 you get basically enough to do every paint you ever have or have had. Like you get 400 or 500 of the damn things.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, because they're designed to fill a pie pan, right?
Yep.
So they sell them inexpensively and they're plentiful. But that's only if you don't, like me, save every little piece off of every model. I have boxes of sprue I really should just throw out.
I remember I threw out like, it was probably like 80 blister packs one day. And I like told George, I threw out like 80 blister packs. Because George started sweating.
Yeah, it's
But,
horrible.
But they're so useful. I
They
will
are.
someday use them. They will, one day, blister packs will save the world, Will.
I have a lot of blister packs.
And I'm like, yeah, I'm not really worried about it. There'll be another one on my desk tomorrow.
You got metals in our water. You son of a bitch.
Oh, did I screw up your enough metallics that you're finally seeing them come out?
Yeah.
Any tips on
amazing.
glazing?
Really cool, actually.
Getting the like top highlight color?
Could you rephrase the question?
So I am following what I would say is a pretty standard type of thing that you find in a book, which is your base coat should be color X, your shade coat should be color Y, your highlight should be color Z. The way I have always done that is paint on the base coat sort of in a normal way, thin the shade, put it sort of around the edges and in the creases, and then thin the highlight and then sort of put that kind of middle-ish. But I find that often the just thinned with water paint tries to beat up and tries to leave all kinds of weird areas. So what I end up doing is
Are you getting, like,
putting
the
it
coffee
on,
stain?
play with it. Not quite the coffee stain, but it tends to beat up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a couple of ways to approach that, George, that could be helpful to you. I'll start with what my good friend Dallas would say. Have you tried two-brush blending, my friend?
I'll
For
take
real,
that as a no.
Just spin.
whether
As
you
far as
really
I can
wanna
tell,
spit on
it
the
involves
brush or not.
spitting on the model and then scooshing my brush around.
Yeah,
we have
the
done an
idea-
entire
the
course.
idea is that you apply with one brush and then you use another clean brush to kind of work it out. It sounds to me like either way you're working with too much water or too
okay.
much paint.
So I'm either
You're going to work with paint that's so wet that it's beating up on your model or giving you tide marks. Then you need to use substantially less paint. Or you need to use drier paint. It's one or the other.
One of the things you can do to, so when you're doing glazing,
Wait, just a second, hang on. Is that what George is doing right now?
Georgia, yep, that is kind of what he's doing right now. So one of the things you
Yeah.
can do.
So the answer is you've got like 5 times too much paint on there.
got it. Okay.
So
If that's the technique you want to use,
Way down.
yeah,
Well, it is watered way down, but I'm using
it's watered down. But watch this.
Yeah.
So this is what I do when I'm glazing. I get my glaze, I fill my brush, right?
Yep.
You see how my brush puffs up?
Mm-hmm.
That's bad.
Too much.
If my brush is puffed up, like if the brush tip is puffed up and not pointed, then it is too much. So I go over to my paper and I'm going to get rid of the excess until I get a sharp point. And if I can't get a sharp point, if it's still puffed up, then I've still got too much water. Now, if you take a look at my brush tip, it's not puffed up anymore. It's no longer splayed. And you can see that I've got it to a point and I've got a lot less water on it. So if I take your model and I do glazing, it's now going to be controlled. So like I can see that control. See, it's not pooling. It's literally just putting that thin coat of paint on that I want.
Okay.
And you see
I'm
how
so glad you're there, Will.
What's that?
I'm so glad you're there.
It's not like a wash, basically.
Yeah, the problem is you're still treating it like a wash, and what you're actually trying to do is you're just trying to leave a thin, transparent coat of paint, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you can see that I'm still applying paint. So so with this white is really cool because you can actually create.
You can actually see it.
You're almost water painting. Think of it like water paints, where you're pushing the paint around, so you're creating those depth and dark areas with the wash, and then you can just keep building them.
And of course, the problem is I'm doing it on the shoulder pads where it's already like it's a dark color.
Well, yeah,
that
and
I'm
you also
overlaying.
want that to dry first. That's really important
Yeah.
to get
So
that.
I should be really leaving these to dry a lot longer
You
than
should,
I am.
yeah, because you can see how you still got a gloss to them. They're still super wet, but you saw how
You can break the paint.
What's going to happen is you're going to start tearing the acrylic as it forms. Like the water evaporates, it's a plastic coating on there.
Yeah.
You're going to start tearing it up.
Yep.
And that's when you get those like weird ridges of color that never want to go away.
Yeah.
So if
So
you're
the correct answer is
assembly
hairdryer.
lining things, George, you know, do one coat on everything and then go back and do another coat on everything if that's what you need. If you need to build that color up more, you need to either do more glazes the way Will just showed you, or if you want to do like it's a question of how fast you want to go versus how well you want it to blend.
Got it.
If you want it to go a little faster, you can use a less watered down version of that, but use the same technique.
Okay.
Right? Still wet, but but the faster you go, the harder it is to actually blend, so to speak.
So what I need to do is just be working on more models or
got a hairdryer.
yeah, do the hairdryer.
Definitely.
The
I always keep a hairdryer in my kit.
The basic thing with glazing is what you're trying to. So you're watering down the pigment so that you've broken the pigment down, and you're trying to leave a minimal amount of transparent pigment on the model, if that makes sense. Like that kind of helps me understand what I'm doing when I look at the science of it. I've broken the pigment down so much that it has very little coverage, but it leaves just that hint of color behind, and that's where that getting rid of all that excess comes into play, because once you've got excess, now it becomes a wash.
Yeah. So here's a question: base color for the metal. Do I go with the deathless metal or the pig iron?
Yep.
Deathless.
It's not even a question,
Always
George.
Deathless.
It
Start with deathless. Work my way up.
it's a great base, especially because you have all that white.
Until Boiler Black is in the store, then
Boiler black.
yeah, the new black.
Oh, it's a
metal.
black metallic.
Yeah.
I have a black metallic that's really good, which is
The Vallejo metal color.
yeah,
Ooh.
the burnt
Good
iron.
stuff.
It is really good.
So, I mean,
Yep.
so James was the first one that ever suggested using deathless. It wasn't deathless metal at the time. It was
It's-
Warp Lock bronze.
Yeah, Warp
but,
Lock
bronze.
Yeah.
What's really great about that is, especially because you've got a white base on your model,
Yeah.
is that gives you the black background you need for the metal to actually hit. If you'll notice when you're painting a metallic over white, most of the time it looks like it's not there.
Yeah, it looks very washed out.
Yeah, it's because you're basically fighting the base stuff, if that makes sense. There's like the goo that is the base and the silicate and the dye. And
Light passes through the top coats of paint and carries information from below it back to your eyes.
Yeah.
So if you have only a white underneath, then the information it carries back to your eye is substantially modified from having any other color underneath there.
And that Warp Lock bronze gets rid of that problem for you, or whatever.
Yeah.
Your
And Deathless Metal is the new Warp Lock bronze. It's very, very similar in color, but P3 paints are not in a shitty jar, and yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
So I'll go with that, and then I'm going to need to brighten it up because it's fighting against the white. because right now it looks like a hole in the model.
Yeah, the base coat in Warplock or Deathless has nothing to do with what your top color will be.
Yeah.
I like it because it gives warmth to whatever metal you put on there. If I really wanted a cold metal, I might actually base in like a navy blue or something like that instead.
Okay.
But 99% of the time, I prefer the look of a warm undertone in the metal. So whether I'm putting silver or gold or like super bright whatever on top, I still go in with that coat first. So it's an extra step, but it makes your pieces look better.
James, promise me something. When we finally develop our own paint line, can we have one of our paints be called Super Bright Whatever?
Yeah, works for me. Love it. I put that on everything.
That shit. We'll have that shit and Super Bright Whatever. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are winding down. We got about 10 minutes left in the cast tonight. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We've got a few bits of upkeep to do before we log off for this evening. I want to do a big shout-out to the guys at Nova Open. We're going to be sending in our pieces in the next couple of weeks to get to the Nova Open, and at that point, we'll try to bring Dave on. Dave was on the show a couple of years ago, or last year, at about this time. And what we'll do is we'll try to do it on a hobby night. So it'd be really cool to have James, all of us, and Dave all painting on the cast. It'd be pretty sweet.
The camera's going to be so tiny.
It's going to be tiny cameras, but we'll all deal with it. You'll have to broadcast it on your big screen. You'll have to that's what you have to do at home. You have to watch the Mies on big
Twitch
screen.
On your smart
It'll be
TV.
worth it just to hear Dave Taylor's accent.
Oh, yeah. Dave Taylor. Sexy British accent. Drop my pants.
Or Australian, whichever.
Was it Australian? Oh, it's Australian, isn't it? I feel bad.
That's hilarious.
It's Australian, but he's been in the United States for a long time, so might as well be British.
It's UK-ish.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot of Australian people that won't all
that
be
are
annoyed.
so mad at us right now. Our one Australian fan.
Orange.
Oh dang! Oh, you're doing an orange for the hair, are you?
Yep. For the back spikes, anyway. I figured after I saw Aaron Lovejoy's one with the big orange beard, I was like, "Yep, orange spikes it is."
Yeah, that's I've sort of taken. So I put that into my tartan. I put the orange into my tartan and into. That's pretty much where it is. The tartan and the spiky hair thing, bobs have quite a bit of orange into them. All right, George, this is your opportunity to plug all damn competitions and stuff.
So the next there's one more left in the Out of the Box tournament series before the big finals. I've been streaming those, by the way, so if you check our YouTube channel, you can watch some really good games and then the rest of us play when Marc-Andre isn't on stream.
Thanks, by the way. I want a big shout out for George for streaming some games from our local competitions again. I know that the audience has been really enjoying those.
Yeah, we're able to get about 3 or 4 games a month coming out on the channel because of that. It's really nice. And so there's one more, and then there's the finals. If you are going to the hobby nights on Tuesdays at Out of the Box, please go to the SurveyMonkey link and report your games, because remember, there are some tournament seats for the final tournament that are actually not coming from the tournament series. They're coming from people who show up every week and play games. And that way, even if you are not a player who wins all the time at tournaments, and you're a player who just shows up every hobby night, every game night, and plays games with everybody who comes out, you'll be able to get a seat at the final table. And there is quite a large prize for the finals. There is basically a $500 army coming in for first place.
Nice.
And then along with that, everybody who makes it into the finals, there's basically a big goodie bag that each person gets that's got all kinds of stuff for painting and modeling and stuff in there. So it's definitely, if you are in the area and you haven't reported your week games, make sure you do that. Along with that, there is a team tournament coming up. If you are listening to this tomorrow, our time, or today when it just comes out, there's a tournament happening in Kingston. I still think there's a few seats. If you want to play some of the best players in Canada, get yourself down to Kingston. And then what else have we got coming up?
I like that Jason noped out of that tournament the moment he found out it was going to be like 600 sharks in him.
Yeah. I also can't afford it. And there's a bunch of Legion issue things coming out this week, so
got to get some
Not
moolah
going to the one
together.
on Saturday, Jason? Or is this a different one?
no, the one on Saturday I can't go.
Okay.
Just too much. Too much.
Too much of a muchness.
Understood.
And then after that, I think we're done locally right now. Well, that brings us into August. So, and then there'll be Capital City Bloodbath that we're running a tournament at again, and then that's sort of the end of summer for us.
Oh, the end of summer. We haven't even got to summer yet.
Yeah, but you got to remember, as an organizer, I'm minimum 6 months ahead in my
True that.
organization.
So things on my board for upkeep, I just want to do a big shout out for Out of the Box. Sounds like they're doing quite a bit for the tournament series that's going on in the area. I've got one more shoot coming up, and then after I get back from that shoot, my wife has graciously allowed me to take Tuesday nights off, and I'm going to try to go to Out of the Box and do. I'm going to bring paints with me. So if there is no game to be gotten, which I've heard sometimes happens because there's so many people, not enough tables, etc., we'll do some painting. Whoever needs sort of tips and tricks, and I'll get some more stuff done. So that's happening. I did promise them to do a painting course at Out of the Box at one point or another, but of course life has gotten in the way. We'll get there eventually. Thanks for all those people that wanted to take the course and are being super, super patient about the whole thing. Jason, you're like the man at the pub right now. Do we have anything cool happening at the pub? You're just eating your brush. That is creeping me out. You know you're supposed to lick the brush while you paint, not just.
Oh, you're not just supposed to load it with
No.
paint and just lick it?
No.
It's not an
that's
ice cream cone?
Super weird, bro.
No.
All right.
Monday nights.
Monday
if
nights.
you're in the area, come out to the pub, have some
Yeah.
fun,
Yeah.
drink some beers, play some games.
Oh, I got a copy of the caster draft.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm gonna start bringing that with me. So prepare for some
I
lunacy.
think we should arrange a Saturday
Yeah.
at the pub and book the upstairs and
That sounds
do
amazing.
a caster draft.
Totally in.
Get like 6 or 8 of us. And
Yep.
Do 3 or 4 rounds of caster.
I would say
draft.
sign me up, but my wife will make me work or something instead.
Yep.
Because that's how my life works. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. James, do you have anything cool going on in your area that you need to talk about? And we're getting ready for some big stuff coming up in the world of painting. Tell us all about it.
So I'm working my way up to doing some painting seminars or lessons over the summer. I've been talking with Ken at Badger Airbrush, and he's going to help sort me out with some stuff for an airbrushing class.
Ooh, I'll take that.
Which has been in much demand.
Yep.
And I'm also looking at doing a bust painting class, intro to bust painting. And the fine people at Broken Toad, I'm going to be working something out there so that we can do some Broken Toad busts. And
That's entirely different from us just painting our own breasts, right?
sure,
Okay.
maybe a little bit of all of the above. So there's the Veteran Rage bust, and there's the new Piper bust. I'm just trying to decide exactly how I want to go about this. I have a feeling that's one of those classes where it might make the most sense to do kind of like a part 1 and part 2. And so maybe start with the Rage bust because it's fairly straightforward, and then move on to either the Piper or the one of the girl with the otter. Because painting female figures is also a little different than painting male ones. So we'll see. I'm still working out the details, but those are things that are coming up this summer in the Kingston to Ottawa area.
Sweet beans. I'm looking forward to those. I've been wanting to take your airbrushing course for a while, so I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, I got a really nice, expensive airbrush, and I have no idea how to use it.
I think that's 95% of the people that own airbrushes out there.
Yeah.
I think that's the story that they all tell.
You can count me in on that.
All right, everybody. I think we're going to end it for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you guys for helping me get some more of my painting done. James, thanks for all your tips and tricks. Really appreciate it as always.
Anytime, guys.
We'll see you guys all in about 3 weeks for yet another Moosemachines Magical Mystery Painting Tour.
One of these days you'll get it right.
I'll get a name. And with James Craig. There we go.
Dice down! Moose Machine and This Death Clock Has 60 Minutes is a proud part of the Muse on Minis network. Podcasts go online every Thursday morning. You can watch the show live every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern on Twitch and keep in touch with us on our Facebook page. Just Google Moose Machine. If you can't find us, you're doing the internet wrong.
Solid, man. That was like